The station called Threshold hung quietly above the blue and green world the humans called Earth. It had been there for 43 years. Nobody on Earth could see it without a telescope, and even then, most people who looked never found it. It was small, dark, and built to stay hidden. Inside the station, a coalition researcher named Doran Vey sat in a round white room, staring at a wall of moving light. The wall showed numbers, charts, and pictures. All of it was about humans. Doran was not human. He belonged to a species called the Ithran, tall gray beings with long fingers and calm, patient eyes. The Ithran were one of 11 species that made up the coalition, a group of civilizations that had explored the stars for thousands of years before humans had even built their first city. Doran had spent 31 years of his life studying humans. He had watched them from orbit. He had read their books. He had listened to their music, watched their wars, and counted their dead. He had built reports so long that no single being could read them all in one lifetime. And still, he did not understand them. That was the strange part. The coalition had studied thousands of species across the galaxy. Every species had a purpose that could be seen clearly once you watched them long enough. The Dren were built for trade. Their bodies were built for careful thought and patience, perfect for slow negotiation across centuries. The Kos were built for building. Their minds could hold 1,000 small details at once, perfect for large works of engineering that took generations. The Ithran, Doran's own people, were built for watching, learning, and understanding. It was why the coalition trusted them to run the studies. Every species had a role. The galaxy worked like a great machine, and each species was a different kind of gear. Humans did not fit. At first, this had not seemed strange. When the coalition first found Earth, the humans were still new to space. Their ships were slow and crude. Their weapons were weak compared to coalition technology. Their bodies were soft, without claws, without thick skin, without any special resistance to cold, heat, or sickness. A human could be hurt by almost anything. A human could die from a fall, from hunger, from a small cut that became infected. By every measure the coalition used, humans looked like one of the weakest species they had ever found. They should not have survived this long, Doran said quietly to the empty room. He said this often. It had become a habit, almost like a prayer. The door of the round white room opened, and another Ithran walked in. Her name was Sela Orun, and she was the head of the Human Study Division. She was older than Doran, with pale gray skin and eyes that had seen many long years of quiet work. "You are still awake," Sela said. "The council meeting is in 6 hours." "I could not sleep," Doran said. "I keep looking at the numbers, and they keep telling me the same thing. Humans should not exist the way they do." Sela sat down across from him. "Explain." Doran turned to the wall of light and brought up a new chart. It showed a long line of small pictures, humans in different times and places, cave paintings, ancient cities, old wars fought with swords and shields, then wars fought with machines, then finally, humans standing on the surface of their own moon. "Every species we have studied follows a pattern," Doran said. "A species is born into an environment, and its body and mind grow to match that environment. The desert folk of Corvain have thick skin because their world is hot and dry. The deep-sea folk of Thess have no eyes because their world is dark. Every trait has a reason. Every trait is an answer to a question the environment asked." "That is basic science," Sela said. "Why does this trouble you tonight?" "Because I cannot find the question that humans are the answer to," Doran said. "Look at their bodies. Weak claws, no natural armor, poor smell, poor hearing compared to most predators on their own world. They cannot run as fast as the animals that used to hunt them. They cannot see in the dark. On their own planet, in the wild, a human should have been easy prey. And yet they became the strongest species on their world," Sela said. "Yes, that is the problem." Doran leaned forward. "I have read their old stories, their myths, their history books. Over and over, I see the same thing happen. Something terrible occurs. A disease, a war, a disaster, a famine, and it should end them. By any normal measure, it should end them. And it does end many of them. But the ones who remain do not give up. They do not scatter and vanish like other species would. They gather together. They build something new from the ruins, every single time. Sayla was quiet for a moment. You believe this is a real pattern and not simply luck. I believe it happens too many times to be luck, Doran said. I have looked for the trait. I have looked for the gene, the instinct, the reason. Every other species we know has one great gift that explains their survival. Humans do not seem to have one great gift. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They are not the smartest. Not compared to the Ithran or the Kalu. Their bodies break easily. Their lives are short. Then what do they have? Doran did not answer right away. He looked at the moving pictures on the wall. Humans pulling each other from fallen buildings after an earthquake. Humans standing in long lines to give blood after a disaster. Humans running toward danger instead of away from it, to help someone they had never met. I do not know yet, Doran finally said, but I believe the Council needs to hear what we have found, because I think we have been asking the wrong question for 31 years. 6 hours later, Doran stood in a large circular hall at the center of Threshold Station. Around him sat the Coalition Council, 7 beings from 7 different species, each one representing a piece of the vast alliance that stretched across a third of the galaxy. At the center of the hall floated a large glowing sphere showing Earth, slowly turning. Researcher Vey, said the council speaker, a tall being from the Kalu species with silver skin and 4 calm eyes. You asked for this meeting. You said it was urgent. Please explain. Doran stepped forward. His hands were shaking slightly, though he tried to hide it. He had never spoken before the full council in all his years of service. Honored Council, he began. For 31 years, the Coalition has studied the species known as humans. We have gathered more data on this single species than on any other species in Coalition history. We have watched them grow from simple tribes to a civilization capable of reaching their own moon. Our purpose was to determine what role humans would play once they were allowed to join the wider galaxy. And what have you found? Asked a council member from the Dren species, her voice slow and careful. We have found that we do not know, Doran said. The hall went quiet. Explain yourself, the speaker said. Doran brought up his data on the great sphere above them. Charts filled the air, showing human history, human bodies, human minds. Every species we have ever brought into the Coalition has a clear purpose, Doran said. We know this before first contact is even made. We study the environment a species evolved in, and their nature reveals itself. The Kalu evolved on a world of storms and learned to build shelter and order from chaos, so they became our engineers and lawmakers. The Ithran evolved in a world of long seasons and learned patience, so we became watchers and record keepers. Every species has a shape, a purpose that fits neatly into the great work of the Coalition. He paused. Humans do not have a shape we can find. That is not possible, said a council member from the Kolvash species, a being covered in hard blue plates. Every species has a purpose. It is the first law of Coalition science. I agree it should be true, Doran said, but I have spent 3 decades trying to find the purpose of humans, and I cannot. I have looked at their bodies, weak by most measures. I have looked at their minds, clever, but not the cleverest we have found. I have looked at their history, and here is what troubles me most. He changed the picture on the sphere. It now showed old human battlefields, disaster sites, ruined cities being rebuilt. Every other species we have studied, when faced with disaster beyond their strength, does one of 2 things. They either die or they retreat and rebuild slowly over centuries, staying smaller and more careful after each loss. This is normal. This is what evolution should teach any living thing. Do not take large risks. Protect what you have. Avoid pain. And humans? The speaker asked. Humans do not do this, Doran said. When disaster strikes them, they do not become smaller. They become louder. They do not retreat. They rebuild faster and larger than before, as if the disaster made them angry instead of afraid. We have watched this happen after every major human catastrophe for the last 5,000 years of their recorded history. It should not be possible. No species should behave this way, because it should have gotten them killed a very long time ago. And yet, here they are, at the edge of space, more numerous than nearly any species we have found. Silence filled the hall. You are saying the Kolvash council member said slowly, that humans do not follow the rules our science is built on. I am saying, Doran said, that after 31 years of study, we still do not know what humans were built for, and I believe, honored council, that this is a dangerous thing not to know, because whatever it is powerful enough that it has kept a soft, slow, weak-clawed species alive and growing for longer than it should have been possible. The speaker was quiet for a long moment, his 4 eyes fixed on the turning image of Earth. What do you recommend, Researcher Vey? Doran took a breath. I recommend we stop studying humans from a distance. I recommend direct contact, not a small survey team. Not a hidden observation post, I mean real contact. An event large enough and dangerous enough that we will finally see what humans do when the stakes are as high as they can possibly be. A council member gasped. You want to put humans in danger, on purpose, to study them? No, Doran said. I want to be there when danger finds them anyway, because it always does. I only ask that this time, the coalition is watching closely and ready to understand what we see. The speaker looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. There is already a crisis forming near their space, said a quiet voice from the back of the hall. It belonged to a council member who had not yet spoken, an old being from the Vandrai species, keepers of long-range sensors across coalition space. A raider fleet, outside coalition law, has been seen moving toward the outer edge of human space. Scavengers, killers. They believe humans are an easy, undefended target. Doran felt something cold move through him. When? He asked. Soon, the Vandrai elder said. Days, perhaps. No more than a season. The speaker looked at Doran for a long time. Then it seems, Researcher Vey, the speaker said, that you will have your answer sooner than you expected. Prepare your teams. Move Threshold Station closer to human space. Whatever this raider fleet brings, the coalition will be watching. And perhaps, at last, we will learn what humans were built for. Doran bowed his head, but inside, a strange feeling was growing in his chest. Something between fear and hope. Far below, on the blue and green world, humans went about their lives knowing nothing of the darkness moving toward them, and nothing of the ancient, patient eyes that had been watching them for over 30 years, waiting to understand what could not yet be understood. The answer, Doran suspected, was coming whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. The raider fleet was called the Ash Pack by those who feared it, and it had earned that name across a dozen star systems. It did not belong to any government. It did not follow any law. It was made of stolen ships, broken alliances, and killers who had been thrown out of every civilized space they had ever touched. The Ash Pack had one rule: find the weak and take everything. Their scouts had been watching the edge of human space for almost a year. What they saw pleased them. A young species, only a handful of colonies beyond their home world, ships that were fast but lightly armed, defense fleets that were small, spread thin, and untested in real war. Easy prey, their scouts reported, rich in resources, weak in defense. The target they chose was a colony called New Harbor, built on a rocky moon at the edge of settled human space. 12,000 people lived there, mining rare metals and growing food in large glass domes under an artificial sun. It had no real military. It had a small planetary defense force, a few dozen ships meant for stopping pirates and smugglers, nothing more. The Ash Pack sent 11 warships. Above New Harbor, hidden inside a cloaked section of space, Threshold Station had moved into position. Doran Vey stood in the observation hall with Sela Orun and a dozen other researchers, all of them watching screens that showed the moon below and the growing storm of enemy ships approaching it. They have no idea we are here, Sela said quietly. That is the point, Doran said. We watch. We do not interfere. Whatever happens, happens as it would happen without us. And if they are destroyed? A younger researcher asked, her voice tight. If all 12,000 of them die, and we simply watch? Doran did not answer for a moment. The question sat heavy in his chest, because he had asked himself the same thing many times since the council had approved this plan. The coalition has rules against interference, Doran finally said. We are not permitted to change the outcome of events for a species that has not yet joined us. If we save them ourselves, We will never know what humans would have done. We will only know what we did instead. That feels cruel, the younger researcher said. It is cruel, Doran said, but it is also the only way to find the truth. And I believe, whatever happens down there, it will teach us more than 31 years of watching from orbit ever did. On the screen, the 11 Raider ships broke formation and began their attack. Inside New Harbor's command center, a woman named Captain Renata Cole stood at the center of chaos. Alarms rang through every hallway. Red lights flashed across every screen. Her communication officer, a young man barely 2 years out of training, shouted numbers at her faster than she could process them. 11 ships, Captain. 11. We have 9, and half of ours are cargo haulers with mounted guns, not real warships. Renata looked at the map glowing above the command table. 11 red dots against 9 green ones. The math was simple, and the math was bad. Get me Planetary Defense Command, she said. Already on, Captain. This is Cole, she said into the comm. All ships, listen to me. We cannot win a straight fight. We do not have the numbers, and we do not have the firepower. So we are not going to fight straight. Then what do we do? A pilot's voice crackled back, tense and afraid. We use what we have, Renata said. The cargo haulers have heavy shielding built for hauling ore through asteroid fields. Put them in front. Let them soak the first hits. Fighters, you stay behind the haulers and pick off anything that gets close. Mining Station 3, I need you to redirect your ore-cutting lasers toward orbit. They are not weapons, but they can burn through hull plating if we get an enemy ship close enough and hold the beam steady. Captain, those lasers were never meant for combat. They were never meant for a lot of things, Renata said. Today they are weapons. Move. Down in the domes, civilians were being rushed into shelters built into the rock beneath New Harbor. Parents carried children. Old men and women who could barely walk were helped along by neighbors and strangers alike. There was screaming, there was fear, but there was also something else. Something that Doran Vey, watching from far above, leaned forward to study closely. Nobody was running alone. Every person who reached the shelters first turned back to help pull others in. A group of teenage workers, barely more than children themselves, formed a human chain to carry an injured miner down 3 flights of stairs when the elevator failed. An old woman who ran the colony's small hospital refused to go to the shelter at all, staying instead in the medical bay, preparing beds for the wounded she knew were coming. They are not panicking the way our models predicted, a researcher whispered beside Doran. No, Doran said, they are not. The battle above New Harbor was short and brutal. The cargo haulers, their heavy mining shields glowing white-hot under enemy fire, held the line just long enough for the human fighters to strike back. 2 Raider ships were destroyed in the first exchange, their wreckage scattering across the black sky. But the humans paid a price too. 1 hauler crew, all 6 of them, died when their ship's shield finally failed and enemy fire tore through the hull. Renata heard the report and felt her chest tighten, but there was no time to grieve, not yet. Mining Station 3, are the cutting lasers online? Online, Captain. Aim is manual. We've never done this before. I don't know if... You'll figure it out, Renata said. You have to. The Raiders, confused by the strange resistance and unexpected firepower, regrouped for a second wave. Their commander, a scarred pirate named Ghoul, who had raided 100 worlds before this one, snarled at his own crew. They are supposed to be weak, he said. Soft. This is not soft. Below him, on the moon's surface, something even stranger was happening. A group of miners, unable to fight in space, had taken it upon themselves to do something no raider had ever expected. Using heavy mining equipment, they began digging trenches and setting up makeshift barricades around the colony's power core, not because command had ordered it, but because they had decided, on their own, that if the raiders somehow got past the fleet and tried to land, they would not find the colony's heart undefended. No orders were given for this, Sayla said, watching the feed with wide eyes. No orders were needed, Doran replied quietly. That is exactly what I have been trying to explain to the Council. The second wave of raiders broke through the human fighter line, and 3 ships turned toward New Harbor itself, weapons charging to fire directly into the domes below, into the homes, the shelters, the 12,000 lives sheltering in the dark. Mining Station 3's cutting lasers, aimed by trembling, untrained hands, found their mark. One raider ship's engine exploded in a silent flash of light. It spun out of control and crashed into a second raider ship, both of them tumbling into the rocky surface of a nearby asteroid field. The third ship kept coming. Renata made a choice in half a second, the kind of choice that would be studied and remembered by the watching aliens above for years afterward. All haulers, all fighters, converge on that ship, now, everything we have. Captain, that leaves the rest of the fleet exposed. I know, Renata said. Do it anyway. Every ship she had turned toward the single incoming raider vessel, throwing every weapon, every trick, every ounce of strength they had left at the one enemy that threatened the colony directly. It was not a wise tactical decision by any book Doran had ever studied. It left New Harbor's remaining defenses dangerously thin. It should have been the wrong choice. The raider ship broke apart under the combined fire, tumbling into the black sky in burning pieces. Ghoul, watching his fleet crumble faster than any raid he had ever led, made the only choice that made sense to him. Pull back, he snarled. Pull back. This is not worth it. The remaining raider ships turned and fled into the dark, leaving behind 6 destroyed vessels and a colony that, against every reasonable expectation, still stood. In the observation hall of Threshold Station, silence had fallen over the researchers. On the screen, New Harbor's people were pouring out of their shelters, some crying, some cheering, many simply holding each other in the strange quiet that comes after fear finally lets go. They should have lost, the younger researcher said softly. By every calculation we ran before this began, they should have lost that fight. Yes, Doran said, his eyes fixed on the screen. They should have. Sayla turned to him. What do you think it was? What made the difference? Doran thought of the cargo haulers throwing themselves in front of danger. He thought of the miners digging trenches nobody ordered them to dig. He thought of Renata Cole gambling everything to protect the people she was responsible for, even when the math said she shouldn't. I do not think it was one thing, Doran said slowly. I think it was many small things, all pointing the same direction. When humans are threatened, something in them does not ask, how do we survive this? It asks, how do we protect what matters, no matter the cost? Every species we have studied puts survival first. I am beginning to believe humans put something else first, and their survival simply follows from that. That sounds almost like the beginning of an answer, Sayla said. It is the beginning of a question, Doran corrected gently. I want to know what that something is, and I do not think we will find it from orbit anymore. I think it is time the Coalition speaks to a human directly. Below them, on the rocky moon of New Harbor, Renata Cole stood outside the ruined command center, looking up at a sky that had nearly swallowed her home, having no idea that somewhere above her, ancient eyes had been watching every second of it, and were now more determined than ever to understand what they had seen. 2 weeks after the battle at New Harbor, a single Coalition shuttle broke through the clouds above the colony and landed in the open square outside the rebuilt command center. It did not hide. It did not sneak. It came down slowly, lights blinking in a pattern meant to look peaceful, and it waited. Renata Cole was the first to reach it, flanked by a dozen armed guards who did not lower their weapons even once. The shuttle's door opened, and Doran Vey stepped out into the open air of a human world for the first time in his life. He was tall, gray-skinned, with long fingers and calm eyes that took in everything around him at once. The guns pointed at him, the rebuilt walls still scarred from battle, the faces of people who had learned 2 weeks ago that they were not as alone in the universe as they had once believed, and that being watched did not always mean being safe. My name is Doran Vey, he said, using a small device on his chest that turned his words into the local human language. I represent a group of civilizations called the Coalition. We mean you no harm. We have been watching your world for a long time, and after what happened here, I believe it is time we spoke honestly. Renata studied him for a long moment. Her hand did not move from the sidearm on her hip. You watched us, she said. You watched the attack, and you did nothing. Yes, Doran said. There was no point lying, not now. I am not proud of that choice, Captain Cole, but I am here to explain why it was made, if you will allow me. Renata's jaw tightened. Behind her, several of the guards shifted, their weapons rising slightly. But after a long moment, she raised a hand, and the guards lowered them again. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Then you tell me everything, or you get back on that ship." They sat in a small room in the rebuilt command center, the walls still bearing the marks of hasty repair. Doran explained everything: the 31 years of study, the Coalition's law against interference, the reason New Harbor had been chosen, and the question that had brought him down to the surface at last. Renata listened without speaking until he had finished. Then she leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable. "So we were a test," she said. "You were an unavoidable event that we chose to observe honestly, rather than pretend did not exist," Doran said. "I understand if that distinction means little to you right now." "You could have warned us," Renata said, her voice sharp. "You could have given us more time, more information. 6 of my people died in that fight. Good people, people with families." "I know," Doran said quietly, "and I carry that. But Captain Cole, if we had warned you, if we had helped you prepare in ways beyond what you could have prepared on your own, we would never have learned what I came here to learn. We would have seen a battle shaped by our own interference, not a true answer to the question that has troubled my people for decades." "And what question is that?" Doran met her eyes. "What are humans built for?" Renata blinked, caught off guard by the strange simplicity of the question. "Every species in the Coalition," Doran continued, "has a clear purpose that we can see in their nature. It comes from how they evolved, what dangers shaped them, what strengths they built to survive those dangers. We have studied your species for 31 years, and we cannot find that purpose. Your bodies are soft, your natural weapons are weak. On your own world, in the wild, you should have been prey, not the dominant species you became. And yet, every time disaster strikes your people, you do not shrink. You grow larger, louder, more determined. It should not be possible. I watched it happen again 2 weeks ago, right here, on this ground." Renata was quiet for a long time, staring at the table between them. "You want to know why we didn't run?" she finally said. "I want to know why cargo haulers with no combat training threw themselves in front of enemy fire to protect fighter pilots they had never met," Doran said. "I want to know why miners dug trenches around a power core with no orders to do so. I want to know why you gambled your entire remaining fleet on a single desperate move to save people in shelters you could not even see. By every measure my people used to predict behavior, none of that should have happened, and yet all of it did." Renata was silent for a moment, thinking. "I don't know if I have a good answer," she said slowly, "but I can tell you what it felt like. It wasn't brave. It wasn't some grand plan. When those ships turned toward the domes, I didn't think about numbers or odds. I thought about the people inside. My people. And there wasn't really a choice in my mind at all. There was just, this has to not happen, whatever it costs. That is what I do not understand," Doran said. "In every other species, the mind calculates cost against benefit, even in crisis, especially in crisis. Why did yours not?" Renata thought about this for a long moment before she answered. "Maybe because we've had so much practice," she said. "Look, my grandmother survived a war that killed millions of people. My grandfather rebuilt a city that had been bombed flat. My people have been doing this exact same thing, over and over, for our whole history. Floods, plagues, wars. Every time something tries to wipe us out, some of us die, sure. A lot of us die, sometimes. But the ones who are left don't sit down and give up. They can't. It's not really a decision anymore. It's just what we do. Maybe after enough disasters, it stopped being a choice and became something closer to instinct." Doran leaned forward, something sparking behind his calm gray eyes. "An instinct," he repeated. "Built not by a single environment, the way our science expects, but by an unbroken chain of disaster after disaster, each one shaping the next generation a little more." "I guess," Renata said, "we're not built for peace and comfort, Mr. Vey. Most of our history hasn't had much of either. Maybe we're built for exactly the opposite, for the moment everything falls apart, and somebody still has to hold the line so the next generation gets a chance to exist at all." Doran sat back slowly, his mind turning over her words again and again. "Built for catastrophe," he said quietly, almost to himself. Not born from a gentle world that shaped a gentle strength, like every other species we know. Born from an endless string of near endings, each one leaving behind those who refused to stop, until refusing to stop became written into what you are. Something like that, Renata said. I've never really thought about it like a science question before. To us, it's just called being human. That night, Doran sat alone in his small quarters aboard the shuttle, still parked in the square outside New Harbor's command center. He recorded a report for the council, his voice steady even as his thoughts raced. I believe, he said into the recorder, that we have been asking the wrong question from the beginning. We asked what environment shaped humans, expecting a single world, a single set of dangers, the way it works for every other species we know. But humans were not shaped by one world. They were shaped by thousands of years of disaster after disaster, war after war, loss after loss, each one testing them, and each one leaving behind those who would not surrender. Their weakness of body may be real, but it forced a different kind of strength to grow in its place. Not strength of claw or armor, but strength of will, strength of loyalty to one another, and a refusal to accept an ending as final, while any of them still draw breath. He paused, thinking of Renata Cole's tired, steady voice, of the miners digging trenches with no orders, of 6 dead crew members whose names he had already asked to learn. I do not yet know what this means for the coalition, Doran continued. I do not know if this makes humans dangerous or valuable, or both. But I believe, honored council, that we have found the beginning of our answer. Humans were not built for a peaceful galaxy of trade and slow diplomacy, the way most of our members were. I believe humans were built for the moments when everything else fails. I believe, whether the galaxy is ready to admit it or not, that a species built to endure the worst catastrophes imaginable may one day become the very thing that stands between this galaxy and its own ending. He stopped the recording and looked out the small window of the shuttle, at the rebuilt lights of New Harbor glowing steady against the dark, scarred moon. Somewhere far beyond human space, in the deep black between the stars, something ancient and far worse than any raider fleet was beginning to stir. And Doran Vey, without yet knowing it, had just made the first step toward finding out whether his new theory was about to be tested in a way none of them could have imagined. 6 months after Doran Vey's report reached the Coalition Council, something arrived at the edge of known space that no one, human or alien, had ever prepared for. The Vandrai Elder, who had once warned of the Ashpack raiders, was the first to detect it, a shadow moving through the dark between star systems, swallowing light instead of reflecting it. The Coalition had a name for such things, spoken of only in old records and older fears. They called it a devourer. It was not a ship. It was not alive in any way the Coalition understood life. It was a vast structure, kilometers wide, built from technology so old that even the oldest Coalition archives held only fragments about its makers. It moved from star system to star system, and wherever it passed, it stripped worlds of everything that could be used as fuel or material, leaving behind only dead rock and silence. The last confirmed sighting had been recorded 800 years earlier, at the far edge of Coalition history, when it had ended 3 entire civilizations before finally moving on and vanishing into the dark. Now, it was moving again, and its path led directly toward the region of space where humans had only just begun to build their first colonies beyond their home world. The Coalition Council met in emergency session, every world's leadership joining by signal at once. Doran Vey stood before them again, older now, his hair gone from gray to a paler shade after months of restless work. The Devourer's course will take it through 5 systems before it reaches human space, Doran said, the great sphere above the hall now showing a long red line cutting across a field of stars. 3 of those systems are Coalition worlds. The 4th is neutral space. The 5th is Earth's home system itself. Can it be stopped? The speaker asked. 800 years ago, it took the combined fleets of 3 civilizations, working together for over a decade, to even slow it down, said the Vandrai Elder, and they failed to destroy it. It simply moved on when it had taken what it wanted. Then what do you propose? The speaker asked. Evacuation? Evacuation of 3 Coalition worlds and dozens of human colonies, in the time we have, is not possible, Doran said. We do not have enough ships. No civilization does. We have days, perhaps weeks, before it reaches the first coalition system. We must decide now. Do we try to fight? Do we try to evacuate what we can? Or do we abandon these worlds entirely and hope the devourer is satisfied before it reaches our core territories? Silence spread across the hall. It was the kind of silence that came from beings who had spent their whole lives building careful, patient civilizations, now facing a choice with no careful, patient answer. We should withdraw our fleets to protect the core worlds, said the Kolvash Council member quietly. It is a hard choice, but it is the only choice that saves the majority of coalition citizens. That would mean abandoning the outer systems, another council member said, including human space. Humans are not yet coalition members, the Kolvash member replied. Our duty is to our own people first. Doran felt something tighten in his chest. Honored council, he said, if I may, I believe there is another option. Speak, the speaker said. Humans have shown us, twice now, that they do not think the way our models predict when a crisis grows large enough, Doran said. I do not say this lightly, and I do not say it because I have proof it will work. But I believe, if we tell them the truth of what is coming, they will not run. And I believe, if we allow them to fight beside us, instead of only defending our own, we may find a strength in that combination that neither of us has alone. You want to arm an untested species and put them on the front line of a fight we ourselves failed to win 800 years ago, the Kolvash member said sharply. I want to stop underestimating them, Doran said. Twice now, they have done what our science said was not possible. I do not know if it will be enough this time, but I believe it is worth finding out, rather than abandoning them to face the devourer alone while we retreat and hope it never finds us. The speaker looked around the hall for a long moment. Contact the humans, the speaker finally said. Tell them everything. Let them choose for themselves what role they wish to play. And researcher Vey, you will be the one to deliver the message. It seems fitting, given how far this has come. Earth's government received the message 3 days later, delivered by Doran Vey himself, standing before a gathered council of human leaders in a room far larger and far more crowded than the one at New Harbor had been. Renata Cole, now promoted to fleet commander after her actions during the raid, stood among the military leadership present. You are telling us, said the Secretary General, an older woman with tired, sharp eyes, that something the size of a small moon is coming to destroy everything in its path, and that a coalition of civilizations far more advanced than us could not stop it 800 years ago. That is correct, Doran said. And you want our help. I am offering you the truth and the choice, Doran said. The coalition will not force you to fight. Many of my own council believed we should retreat and let your worlds fall, to protect what we could save. I argued against that. I do not know if I was right to, but I believe you deserve to make this choice for yourselves, with full knowledge of what is coming. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Renata Cole stepped forward. What's the plan? If we do fight, she asked. Even a plan that failed once is better than nothing. Doran nodded, grateful for the question. 800 years ago, 3 civilizations tried to destroy the devourer directly and failed. It is too large, too old, too strong. But our new analysis of the old battle records suggests they made a mistake. They focused every weapon on breaking its outer shell, trying to kill it as if it were a single creature. But the devourer is not one thing. It is thousands of smaller systems working together, like a body made of many separate organs. We believe if enough ships strike many small, weak points at once, faster than it can repair them, we may be able to disable it entirely, not by destroying it, but by breaking the connections that let its many parts work as one. That sounds like it needs a huge number of ships hitting it all at once, in perfect coordination, a human general said. Yes, Doran said. More ships than the coalition alone can provide in the time we have. This is why I came to you. Human ships are faster and more maneuverable than most coalition designs, built by a species that has always found ways to do more with less. Combined with coalition firepower and shielding, we believe there is a real chance. Renata looked at the Secretary General. Something passed between them, unspoken but clear. We're not the strongest species in this fight, Renata said, Everybody in this room knows that. But if Mr. Vey is right about us, and honestly, after New Harbor, I think he might be, then this is exactly the kind of fight we don't back down from. Not because we're brave, because backing down never actually saves anybody. It just delays the moment somebody has to stand and fight, and usually makes that moment worse. The Secretary General was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the faces gathered in that room. Military leaders, scientists, ordinary representatives of a species that, 6 months ago, had not even known for certain that other intelligent life existed. "Prepare the fleet," she finally said. "All of it. Tell the coalition, humanity is in." The battle above the human colony world of Meridian Reach, the last system before Earth itself, became known in later years as the Battle of the Long Dark. It lasted 11 days. Human ships, faster and bolder than coalition tacticians expected even after everything they had learned, wove between the Devourer's slow, grinding defenses, striking dozens of small weak points across its vast hull, while coalition warships held the line against its heaviest weapons. Coordination that should have taken months to train fell into place in days, human pilots adapting to coalition battle formations with a speed that left even Doran, watching from threshold stations, stunned. It was not easy. It was not clean. Coalition ships were lost. Human ships were lost. Renata Cole herself took a wound to her shoulder that would leave a permanent scar, refusing to leave her command chair even as medics begged her to. But slowly, piece by piece, connection by connection, the Devourer's many separate parts began to lose contact with one another. Its great engines flickered and dimmed. Its long dormant defenses, once perfectly synchronized, began firing out of order, missing targets they should have hit. On the 11th day, the Devourer went dark. It did not explode. It did not die the way a living thing dies. It simply stopped, drifting silent and cold in the space between stars, its many parts no longer speaking to one another, no longer able to move as one vast, terrible whole. Above the wreckage, human and coalition ships drifted together in the quiet aftermath, and for the first time since first contact had been made, there was no distance between them at all. Only two kinds of survivors, side by side, having done together what neither could have done alone. A year after the Battle of the Long Dark, Doran Vey stood once more before the Coalition Council. The hall was fuller than he had ever seen it, with representatives from every member species gathered to hear the report that had already changed how the galaxy thought about the small, soft-bodied species from the blue and green world. "Honored Council," Doran began, 32 years ago, I was given a simple task: study the humans, learn their purpose, the way we have learned the purpose of every species that has joined our coalition. I told you, a year ago, that I could not find that purpose using the methods we have always trusted. I believe now, I finally can offer you a true answer, though it is not the kind of answer our science was built to expect." He brought up the great sphere at the center of the hall. It no longer showed only Earth. It now showed a wide map of human and coalition space together, marked with new trade routes, new joint colonies, and at its edge, the drifting, silent wreck of the Devourer, kept now as a monument and a warning both. "Every species we have studied was shaped by the world it was born on," Doran said. "A gentle world builds a gentle strength. A harsh world builds a harsh one. This has always been true, and it remains true for humans as well. But their harsh world was not a place. It was time itself. Thousands of years of disaster, loss, war, and recovery, over and over, without end, until the drive to endure and protect one another was carved so deeply into them that it no longer needed to be a choice at all." "You are saying they were built by suffering," the Kolvash Council member said. "I am saying they were forged by it," Doran said, "the same way pressure turns simple stone into something far harder over enough time. Humans do not have the strongest bodies, or the sharpest claws, or the fastest ships. But when everything else fails, when the calculations say retreat, when the odds say surrender, when every other species we have studied would choose to protect itself first, humans choose, again and again, to hold the line for each other instead. Not because it is wise, not because it is safe, because somewhere in the long, hard road of their history, it stopped being a choice and became simply what they are." The hall was silent. every eye fixed on the image of the two fleets, human and coalition, that had stood together against something the galaxy itself had once thought unstoppable. I believe, Doran continued, his voice steady now, sure in a way it had never been 31 years ago, that we did not fail to find a purpose for humans because they lack one. We failed because we were looking for a purpose that fit neatly beside all the others: traders, builders, watchers, engineers. Humans do not fit beside those roles. I believe humans exist for the moments none of the rest of us are built to survive. I believe, whether the galaxy asked for it or not, we have found in humanity something every civilization eventually needs and prays it will never require: a people who will not stop, even when stopping would be the reasonable choice. The speaker was quiet for a long moment, his four eyes resting on the image of the fallen devourer. And what do you recommend the coalition do with this answer, Researcher Vey? Doran allowed himself, for the first time in front of the full council, something close to a smile. I recommend we stop asking what humans are for, he said, and start being grateful they were here when we needed them to be exactly what they are. Far below, on the rebuilt world of New Harbor, Renata Cole stood on a balcony, overlooking the colony that had once nearly fallen to a raider fleet, now grown twice its old size, filled with new arrivals from Earth, and, for the first time, a handful of coalition families who had chosen to make their home among humans rather than simply study them from afar. Beside her stood Doran Vey, no longer a distant watcher hiding behind a cloaked station, but a familiar face who visited often, who had, in his own quiet way, become something like a friend. Your council finally figured us out, huh? Renata said, a small, tired smile on her face. I do not think anyone ever truly figures out another people completely, Doran said, but I believe we understand you better now than we did. Enough, at least, to be glad we did not simply retreat and leave you to face the devourer alone. For what it's worth, Renata said, I don't think we'd have made it without you either. Your ships, your shields, your knowledge of that thing's weak points. We're not the only ones who showed up when it mattered. Doran looked out over the colony, at children playing in the open square where his shuttle had first landed, at workers rebuilding walls that had once been scarred by battle, at a species that, 32 years ago, his people had believed to be weak, fragile, and easily understood. Perhaps, he said, that is the final answer, Captain Cole. Not that humans alone were built for the worst the galaxy can offer, but that when such things arrive, humans are exactly the kind of people worth standing beside. Renata looked at him for a long moment, then out at the stars beginning to appear over New Harbor's horizon, as the artificial sun dimmed toward evening. Yeah, she said quietly, I think I can live with that answer. Above them, far beyond sight, the galaxy that had once wondered what humans were built for now understood something simpler, and something far more important, that no species survives alone, that every civilization eventually needs someone who will not stop, when stopping would be wise, and that against all expectation, against every careful calculation of claws and armor and strength, it had found exactly that in the last place it had ever thought to look.